2,000?
Yeah!
Well, she must be in terrible shape.
Let's find out what the weather is. Hey, I tell you,
Soupy Sales was known as the man who could make anyone laugh. His slapstick comedy, his goofy smile, and his endless pie-in-the-face gags made him one of the most loved entertainers on television. But behind all that laughter was a story full of pain, loneliness, and hidden struggles. The man who brought joy to millions of children spent his life fighting against his own sadness. His story is a reminder that sometimes, the people who make others laugh the most are often the ones crying the hardest when the cameras turn off. Born as Milton Supman in 1926, Soupy's journey from a small town in North Carolina to becoming a national television star was both inspiring and heartbreaking. From the outside, his life seemed glamorous: fame, fans, and fortune. But inside, it was filled with personal loss, addiction, and broken relationships. This is the story of a man who spent his entire life performing happiness, while struggling to find a little of it for himself. Soupy Sales' story begins in Franklin, North Carolina, where he was born to Jewish immigrant parents. His family was one of the very few Jewish families in the area, and because of that, they faced a lot of discrimination. His father ran a small dry goods store, working hard to provide for the family. But the town was not always kind to them. When Soupy was only 5 years old, something terrible happened that would change his life forever. His father was killed by members of the Ku Klux Klan, a racist group that terrorized minorities in the South. They hanged him near the store as a warning to others. This horrifying event left deep emotional scars on young Soupy. He never fully recovered from that trauma. His mother moved the family to Huntington, West Virginia, hoping for a safer life. But the loss of his father stayed with him forever. Growing up in poverty, surrounded by grief, Soupy learned early that laughter could be a way to survive pain. Comedy became his shield, his escape, and eventually, his purpose. In Huntington, Soupy attended school and discovered he had a natural gift for humor. He made his classmates laugh with silly jokes and funny faces. Laughter became his way of making friends and hiding the sadness he felt inside. After high school, he joined the Navy during World War II, serving his country while continuing to entertain his fellow sailors with comedy routines. When the war ended, Soupy went to college on the GI Bill and began working in radio. His energy, quick wit, and charm quickly caught people's attention. He adopted the stage name Soupy Sales, inspired by the nicknames people had given his family: Soup Man. Soon, he moved from radio to television, becoming a local sensation in Detroit with Lunch with Soupy Sales. The show was simple: puppets, slapstick jokes, and Soupy's playful personality, but it had heart. Children loved him, and parents trusted him. Soupy wasn't just an entertainer. He felt like a friend you could laugh with every day. Soupy's success in Detroit was only the beginning. By the early 1960s, he was invited to New York City to host a national television show. The Soupy Sales show became a massive hit across the country. With his famous white pie gags and hilarious sketches, Soupy became a household name. Kids adored him for his silly jokes, while adults appreciated his clever humor that often contained subtle wit. His show featured famous guest stars like Frank Sinatra, Tony Curtis, and even jazz legends like Miles Davis and Count Basie. Everyone wanted to be part of the fun. Soupy was not just another TV clown. He was a bridge between comedy, music, and culture. He gave early television its spirit of playfulness, showing that laughter didn't have to be cruel or cynical. His act was pure, wholesome fun. Yet behind the scenes, Soupy was already struggling with the pressures of fame. The non-stop schedule, the public expectations, and his desire to stay relevant began to weigh heavily on him. In 1965, Soupy's career took a dramatic turn. During one of his live shows, he jokingly told kids watching at home to go into their parents' wallets and send him all the green pieces of paper. It was clearly a joke, but some children actually did it. Suddenly, angry parents began calling television stations, and the media exploded with outrage. The incident nearly destroyed his career. Soupy was suspended from the network and faced public humiliation. Although he later returned to television, the scandal left a permanent mark on his reputation. What was meant to be harmless comedy became a turning point in his life, a moment when the laughter turned against him. For Soupy, this was more than just bad publicity. It was the start of a long, painful decline. He began to feel like the world that once adored him was now laughing at him instead of with him. And that realization deeply hurt the man who had spent his whole life trying to make others happy. As the years went on, Soupy continued performing, appearing in nightclubs, talk shows, and even game shows. But the sparkle of his earlier fame began to fade. The entertainment industry was changing, and the kind of innocent slapstick humor he was known for was becoming old-fashioned. Audiences wanted something edgier. Soupy struggled to adapt, Off camera, his personal life was falling apart. He married twice and had 2 sons, Hunt and Tony Sales, both of whom became musicians. But his marriage ended in divorce, and his relationship with his sons grew distant. Soupy found comfort in alcohol and work, trying to escape the loneliness that haunted him. Those close to him said he could be both the funniest and the saddest man in the same moment. He could make a whole room laugh, then go home and sit in silence. The man who once stood in the spotlight now felt invisible in a world that had moved on without him. Soupy's sense of humor had always been his shield. But as he grew older, that shield began to crack. Behind the laughter, he battled depression and feelings of failure. The industry that once celebrated him had little space for him now. Younger comedians like Richard Pryor and George Carlin were changing the comedy scene with more controversial and political humor. Soupy's clean, family-friendly comedy started to feel outdated. But he never stopped trying to make people laugh. He would appear at small clubs and charity events, still pieing himself in the face, still putting on that same cheerful act. It was as if he believed that if he could just keep laughing, the sadness couldn't catch him. Yet the laughter grew quieter over time. The crowds were smaller, the cheers softer. And for Soupy, who had built his identity on being loved by audiences, that silence was more painful than anything. In his later years, Soupy faced serious health problems. Years of stress, alcohol, and emotional struggle had taken a toll on his body. He suffered from heart disease and other illnesses that left him weak and tired. Still, he rarely complained. Even when he was in pain, he would joke about it. "I'm fine," he would say with a smile. "I just need another pie." But behind that humor was a man who felt forgotten by the world he once entertained. His sons, Hunt and Tony, found their own success in music, playing with big names like Iggy Pop and David Bowie. Yet even as they carried the Sales name forward, their father's legacy seemed to fade into the background. On October 22, 2009, Soupy Sales passed away in New York City at the age of 83. When the news broke, tributes poured in from fans and fellow entertainers who remembered the laughter he had given them. But for many younger generations, his name was just a faint memory from a different time. Looking back at Soupy Sales' life, it's hard not to feel both admiration and sadness. He brought genuine joy to millions of people, creating a space where laughter was pure and simple. He helped shape early television comedy and influenced many who came after him. Yet his personal struggles show how fragile fame can be. Soupy's story reminds us that even those who seem the happiest may be carrying heavy pain inside. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, faced scandals, and lived with regrets. But he never stopped trying to make people smile, and maybe that was his greatest strength. Soupy Sales wasn't just a comedian. He was a symbol of resilience, of someone who kept laughing through life's hardest moments. His life teaches us that laughter may not heal everything, but it can help us survive. Even today, when someone gets a pie in the face for a joke, it's a quiet tribute to the man who made laughter his life's mission. Soupy Sales' story is not just about comedy. It's about the cost of bringing happiness to others while struggling to find your own. His name might not be as famous today as it once was, but his influence lives on in every TV host, every children's entertainer, and every comedian who uses humor to connect with people. He paved the way for the kind of playful television that doesn't take itself too seriously. His jokes were silly, his show was simple, but his impact was lasting. Deep down, Soupy wanted what we all want: to be remembered, to be loved, and to make a difference. And in his own unique, messy, and heartfelt way, he did exactly that. Though his life ended quietly, his laughter still echoes in the memories of those who grew up watching him. The pies, the puppets, the smiles, they were all part of a man who gave everything he had to make the world laugh, even when his own heart was breaking. Soupy Sales may have been known as a clown on camera, but to his sons he was something much more complicated. Hunt and Tony Sales grew up in a home filled with laughter, but also long stretches of absence. Their father was often away performing, chasing the next show, the next laugh. Soupy's dedication to comedy came with a cost. His family life suffered. His marriage to Barbara Fox, his first wife, fell apart under the pressure of fame and long work hours. The boys admired their father, but they also resented how little time he had for them. Yet, despite everything, they inherited his creative spirit. Both sons became professional musicians, forming bands and later joining famous acts like Tin Machine with David Bowie. Through music, they carried a piece of their father's energy. That same wild, unpredictable spark that had made Soupy so magnetic on TV. Even though their relationship with him was not perfect, it was clear that his sense of performance lived on through them. Soupy's influence extended beyond television. It touched generations of artists who would never even meet him, but were moved by the joy he spread. The entertainment world can be cruel to its pioneers. As television evolved in the 1970s and 1980s, many of the early stars who had built its foundation were quietly left behind. Soupy was one of them. While he had once been a beloved household name, the younger generation didn't grow up watching him. His style of humor, clean, physical, and innocent, seemed outdated in a world that now wanted sarcasm and realism. TV executives looked for new faces, and Soupy struggled to find his place in the changing landscape. He continued to perform in smaller venues, often for loyal fans who still remembered his golden days. He hosted local radio shows, did guest appearances, and even appeared in commercials. But the fame he once had was gone. To make things worse, Soupy faced financial problems. The fortune he had earned during his peak years was mostly gone, spent on maintaining appearances and a lifestyle that no longer matched his income. He lived modestly, far from the glamour of his television days. For a man who once had it all, the spotlight, the fans, the laughter, being forgotten was one of the hardest things to bear. While many saw Soupy Sales as just a silly clown, those who knew him personally said he was one of the most intelligent and creative minds in show business. His humor might have seemed simple, but it was carefully thought out. He understood timing, tone, and how to connect with audiences of all ages. Beneath the goofy exterior, Soupy had a deep understanding of performance psychology. He knew that laughter came from surprise, rhythm, and emotional honesty. He also had a deep appreciation for jazz, art, and literature. He often invited jazz musicians onto his show, giving them exposure at a time when television rarely showcased their talent. He loved the art of improvisation, both in comedy and music. That's why his show felt alive. It wasn't scripted like most other programs. Soupy's genius lay in his ability to be spontaneous and real. He didn't just make people laugh, he made them feel connected. Even decades later, comedians like Jim Carrey and Robin Williams would use that same mix of wild energy and sincerity, a style that Soupy helped pioneer. He may not have received the credit he deserved, but his fingerprints are all over modern comedy. Soupy Sales' later life showed how fame can both lift and destroy a person. During his peak, he was adored by millions, but fame is like fire. It gives warmth, but it can also burn. The pressure to stay funny, to always perform, weighed heavily on him. People expected Soupy to be cheerful all the time, even when he was exhausted or heartbroken. He once said in an interview that the hardest part of being funny was trying to stay that way when you don't feel like laughing. His personal struggles with alcohol and depression were partly his way of coping with that pressure. He didn't want to disappoint his fans, so he kept performing, no matter how he felt inside. Those close to him said that after every show, when the lights went off and the audience was gone, Soupy would sit quietly for a long time. The silence after laughter was something he could never get used to. It reminded him of everything he had lost. His father, his marriages, his fame, and sometimes his own sense of self. Soupy Sales might not have seemed like a rule breaker, but in his own way, he was one of the most daring performers on early television. He constantly pushed the boundaries of what could be done on live TV. The famous green paper joke that nearly ended his career was just one example. He liked to challenge authority in small, playful ways. Not with anger, but with humor. He believed laughter was a form of freedom, a way to rebel against seriousness and fear. During a time when television was expected to be polite and proper, Soupy brought chaos and fun. He would throw pies, break the fourth wall, and talk directly to the camera as if the kids watching were his real friends. His show had energy and unpredictability that made it special. In a world full of rehearsed smiles and perfect scripts, Soupy's wild, unfiltered joy felt real. That authenticity inspired countless entertainers after him. Even though he never claimed